Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A lot of really fun storylines for Florida State going into spring practice, going into the 2025 year. I think the national media is going to talk about the newcomers coming into this program, of which I've been very vocal. I'm a much bigger fan of what Florida State did this cycle in the transfer portal as opposed to what they did 12 months ago. To me, one of the biggest storylines, probably the biggest storyline, is the coaching staff changes that Mike Norvell made. This coaching staff in 2024 it was not good enough. Not only the failure to recruit elite high school talent, but the real epic failure of developing your high school talent. When you combine not developing your high school talent along with missing in the transfer portal, that was kind of the lethal combination that resulted in a really ugly 2024 year for Florida State. You got significantly better from a coaching staff camp standpoint going into 2025. I mean, Gus Malzahn was a sitting Power Four head coach at UCF, a guy that historically elite scheming up an offense. And then you look at Tony White. Tony White 12 months ago was a head coaching candidate for UCLA. Was a guy that is a guy that's largely considered one of the best defensive coordinators that you see in the sport. From a coaching staff standpoint, Florida State got significantly better. And when you improve your coaching staff, some of the results you see is, hey, we're going to start putting players in better positions to be successful. You're kind of seeing that here with a guy like Micahi Danzy. I think a fascinating storyline coming out of Tallahassee where Micahi Danzy, running back his freshman year, going to make the move to the wide receiver position. This, to me, makes too much sense for a couple of different reasons. Most notably, you want to put your elite athletes in the best positions to be successful on the football field. Go back to how we talked about Micahi Danzy coming out of high school, where the running back film was impressive. But one of the first things we said when we watched the film of Micahi Danzy was kind of looks like a wide receiver playing the running back position at the high school ranks. This is a guy that has elite top end speed, and you kind of want to utilize that. Putting him at the wide receiver position where he's going to have the ability to really get into that top gear, to me, makes a ton of sense. I'm not saying I like my running backs to be slow, but probably the most overrated conversation we have with running backs is long speed. How often as a running back do you get the chance to really open it up and reach that top gear? The answer is not very often. I mean, you'll go games without reaching that top gear. You're putting Micahi Danzy in a position where he can utilize that elite top end speed more at the wide receiver position. And I think secondly, he's just got a better opportunity to get on the football field where you look at the running back position and say it's loaded. It's really, really deep. I'm not sure if Micahi Danzy was going to really have a spot in this running back rotation over the next couple of years. You put him at wide receiver. I don't know if he starts immediately at wide receiver, but he's a guy that, one, can utilize his best asset, which is speed. And more notably, Florida State is looking for wide receivers to step up on the outside. Micahi Danzy has a better chance of getting involved in this offense as a wide receiver than he did at the running back spot. So there's a couple of reasons to really like this move, and I'm excited to see what it sounds like for this kid over the next couple of months. Now, I want to get into some really, in my opinion, intriguing position battles that we're going to see for Florida State over the next couple of weeks during spring practice. Before we get into it, as always, just a shout out to the Florida State fans, of which many have been rocking with the fellas through some real highs and some real lows. It's always fun talking this program, and the amount of support y'all consistently show the boys means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, I'm going to pull up the depth chart. We're going to go through these position battles. Call your shots in the comment section in terms of how you think some of these position battles play out. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. The quarterback spot, I don't think you have a position battle. And one of the things that excites me the most about Thomas Castellanos is, look, I'm not going to get up here and say he's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick in the 2026 NFL draft, but he's a quarterback that I think both Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn felt comfortable bringing in because they felt comfortable that they could build an offense that can suit Thomas Castellanos. And look, the struggles that this kid had at Boston College in 2024, I think largely stemmed from Coach O'Brien coming in and trying to make Thomas Castellanos a quarterback that he wasn't. They changed the offense. They didn't let him utilize his athleticism as much. I think that hurt him as a quarterback. Go back to 2023 when they were leaning in to what Thomas Castellanos could do. He was a very dangerous, difficult quarterback to deal with if you were an opposing defense. Heck, just ask Florida State. They struggled dealing with Thomas Castellanos a couple of different times over the last couple of years. That excites me. The biggest, I think the biggest storyline for me is what this wide receiver room looks like. And the biggest difference between how we talked about this wide receiver room last year as opposed to how we're going to talk about it this year is this year you have some proven commodities. Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, two guys that have shown they can contribute and produce at the Power 4 level. Go back to last year, it was a ton of potential. Malik Benson, we were fired up about Malik Benson being the wide receiver one in this Florida State offense. We were fired up about what Akeem Williams would look like going into year two. The problem was there was no proven commodities. There were no guys that you looked at and said, yeah, we've seen you produce at the Power 4 level. And when you had guys like Akeem Williams and Malik Benson not really hit their ceiling, what you ended up with was just a wide receiver room that had a bunch of guys that could not play at the Power 4 level. Going into this year, you have your upside. You have a guy like Elijah Moore. You have a guy like Akeem Williams. You have a guy like Deuce Robinson that, although we know can play, we know can potentially be just an elite wide receiver at the college football landscape. You have proven commodities and high upside. That's what you're looking for. And if you're asking me who the two, I think you have two probably locks to start at wide receiver in Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White. What's the rest of the rotation look like? One of the bigger storylines for me with Florida State going through spring practice. Another really intriguing storyline is, hey, who kind of emerges as the running back one? I really do like this running back room. I like the depth. I think what you're looking for is there a running back that can emerge and kind of, for lack of better terms, be the difference maker of this Florida State offense in the 2025 year. We know Florida State is going to want to run the football. It's a completely revamped offensive line that I think is going to be a lot better than it was last year. There's going to be more opportunity for these running backs to really be difference makers. You got a couple of young cats that I think can play. Cam Davis, Usman Kramoa, two guys that I think are absolute studs. Can one of those two backs emerge as one of the best backs in the ACC in 2025? I think there's a chance. That's, to me, a storyline in spring practice is we got a bunch of good guys that we like. What running back separates from the pack and becomes that dude in this running back room going into 2025? The offensive line, I think what your starting five offensive line is going to be, and that's what's on the screen. It's a very experienced group. It's a group that has a ton of guys that have shown they can play at the Power 4 level, which I think is big for Florida State going into 2025. It's hard to check a lot of boxes on the offensive line. To me, I have question marks about the depth of this offensive line. That's for sure. I think a lot of Florida State fans would agree with that. In terms of the starting five, if this unit can stay healthy, should be a much better unit than it was in 2024. The last one on offense that I look at is tight end. I think Landon Thomas can kind of take over this tight end position. I think he can be a legit difference maker as a pass catcher. I think the question mark is he ready to inline block like Gus Malzahn needs his tight ends to block? If that's the case, he's going to be very good for Florida State. Going over to the defensive side of the football, this is where you really like it. You feel like they really improved the competitive depth, specifically in the front seven. A couple of guys that I think are some of the most important names to monitor for Florida State in spring practice. It starts with freshman Kevin Wynn. I think he'll start for Florida State in some capacity. And if it's not starting, it's playing 20-plus snaps a game. It's rare to see defensive linemen coming out of high school that are legitimately ready to play year one. Kevin Wynn, to me, is that guy. The second guy I'm looking at is Jason Jenkins, a guy that I thought played very, very good in the limited snaps that he had at Tennessee, a guy that was playing behind legitimate NFL talent, a guy that going into 2025 can really emerge as a very good football player for Florida State. The last one I will take is Amari Williams at that jack. Talk about another position change that I think makes a lot of sense. Look, I think Amari Williams would have been a very solid tight end. Him at that jack linebacker spot in the Tony White defense, he's built for this position. Ton of juice, great track and field background, very good first step with a lot of length. He has all the traits to be a very, very good pass rusher, but also that athleticism to play in space and drop back in coverage, of which you need from that jack linebacker. So it's a very difficult position to play because you have to be able to play along the line of scrimmage, hold up in the run game, rush the passer, but at the same time, you have to be able to play in space. Stephon Thompson's a guy that has played it in the Tony White defense, both at Syracuse and Nebraska. Not even close, in my opinion, to the athlete that Amari Williams is. If I'm a Florida State fan, I want to see Amari Williams emerge as the starter at that jack linebacker spot. You know Stephon Thompson can do it. Amari Williams offers that upside that I think really can help this defense in the 2025 year. Deeper, more experienced at the linebacker room, a position that was probably the biggest flaw that we saw with Florida State going into 2024. They just didn't have the athletes, certainly weren't coached up the right way. And then in the secondary, the really only one position that Florida State did not choose to address because they did not need to. That's really the only position that they developed and recruited at a level they need to. And so you go into 2025 saying, we got the guys, we got the development that's coming with them. What are the young ones that step up? You know, I think there's going to be a lot of people that assume you lose A.Z. Thomas, you lose Fentrell Cypress, this unit's not going to be as good as it was last year. I think a lot of Florida State fans are saying, well, guess what? We've recruited this position very, very well, and we've also developed this position very, very well as well. I think this unit will just be fine, and I think that the storyline is, all right, who are the young guys that are kind of taking that step going into 2025? Roster's in a better spot. More importantly, the coaching staff is. It's a big year of development for this Florida State program. A lot of really fun position battles to kind of take a look at. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.